Hey everyone, it's AZ with episode number 28 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. Remember way back in episode 20 when I told you that the Friday episodes were going to be primarily short solo episodes, but also I reserve the right to do what I want. Well, today is one of those days. I sat down with not only a guest, but a co-host. Together, we interviewed Dr. Jacob Mota. I really hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, make sure and share it with a friend. Hey everyone, it is AZ with Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I am here with my friend Vince. Vince, say hello.
Hello everybody, thank you for having me.
So we're doing something a little different today. I don't know if you've seen those crossover episodes on TV where, Chicago Fire is on, Law and Order, whatever, but we're doing a crossover episode today with Fire Rescue Wellness and Chicago's Bravest Stories. And our guest today is Jacob Mota. Jacob, tell us about yourself.
Well, hey, first off, thank you both for having me on. Really excited. So I'm a pretty simple dude who just happens to have a pretty cool job as a scientist and a professor.
Okay, and the history here with Jacob is that he was in a lab with Dr. Eric Ryan at the same time my friend Katie Hirsch was with Abby Smith Ryan. So that's the history. All right, so about a week ago, I did a paper review Jacob was an author on, and it was regarding an academy. And I got this text from Vince, and he said, I need to talk to this guy. And so that's where we are today. So I'm going to turn it over to Vince, actually, and let him get the conversation started because Vince is actually a trainer at the Chicago Fire Academy.
Well, hi Jacob, thank you so much for agreeing to be on this podcast. Excuse me. I'm having an attack here.
Vince is verklempt.
I am verklempt. So I saw the study, Annette was kind enough to post some excerpts from it, and like Annette said, I am one of the physical training instructors at the Chicago Fire Department. And according to the legal department, which I spoke to, I also have to acknowledge that I do not represent the city of Chicago or the Chicago Fire Department. So that is my disclaimer. I am one of the physical training instructors, and your study directly affected how I do the training with the Chicago Fire candidates, who we do have a class in currently, and I wanted to see how this study could benefit our candidates. So I was super interested in it because we are actively training these guys right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad you and hopefully some other stakeholders really find what we do is unique and interesting. When it comes to the academy type work, surprisingly, from a science standpoint, there's a very limited amount of work out there. I mean, there's a few studies that have been done in addition to ours, which I'm one person on a part of a really great team here. I'm just happen to be the guy that y'all are talking to, but it's really the whole team that made this happen. But there's just such a surprising limited amount of work out looking at how effective these academies are.
Well, what prompted you to start the study?
Well, it all comes down to this. So this happened whenever I, like AZ said, I was working at my PhD at UNC Chapel Hill with everyone on this team. We were striking up some solid relationships with local fire departments. Won't maybe go into which fire departments in that direction, but there was a number of really good fire department relationships we were striking up, and the questions kind of came up naturally. Say we're finding a lot of problems in the fire service. We're having a lot of problems with injuries, with obesity. How can we get a handle on some of these issues as fire members go through their time as firefighter? And the conversation kind of went to the direction of, well, what are you doing to prepare your firefighters for the job? And that's how we get into this idea of looking at their academy and general academies as a whole. We'll kind of get into it, but we're expanding upon this work right now here in my present position. And yeah, it just kind of came up like that. We want to see how effective are these jobs. And there's a paper that came out several years ago by a colleague of ours, David Cornell. He's at UMass Lowell, assistant professor. He, very similar study, looked at the effectiveness of a fire recruit academy, somewhere in the 30-week range in length, if I remember. And he reported some relatively positive changes, particularly from a body composition standpoint, for recruits who went through the fire academy, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, the big thing that his study looked at there, he and his colleague, that is, all of the adaptations that were seen during the fire academy were gone a year after the fire academy.
Well, and Jacob, that's pretty typical, because we get these young candidates coming into the fire department, and some of them maybe aren't in the best shape of their life, and then they go through these fire academies, get in great shape. Then the next thing that happens is they go through probation, and everything changes. And so that's very typical with what we see as well across the board.
Yeah, and the hard part about it is while you're going through your probe year, and every single year after, it never gets easier to pick it back up, right? Just like any other person trying to maintain their own health, there's always parts of life that come in. The magic is how do we fix that problem at the academy level? How do we make academies the most efficient that we can, and how do we make the departments the most efficient that we can? And then it's kind of going back to discussions at the level of the academy. There is no standard, nationally speaking, from a training standpoint, right? You talk to 10 different academy leaders, you're going to have 10 different responses to what their PT is going to be, how frequently they're doing it, the intensity they're doing it, etc.
Yeah, 100%. I was never giving a playbook about the things I'm supposed to do, and I don't think that it's so much of the training is subjective to the individual, whoever is responsible for PT for any given academy. And I just think that we've come a long way from where we used to put somebody in that position who was just fit, or who was a go-getter, but didn't have any formal training in fitness or strength and conditioning. And I think we're getting so much better at that. Or somebody who excelled in an academy that may not have been that safe. Maybe he was just a really tough guy. Hey, let's have that guy run it. And he's just doing what he knew from his academy.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jacob, you said that they improved in some of the respects that you were measuring, or some of the parameters that you were measuring. Why don't you start outlining some of those specific areas where your candidates showed improvement?
Yeah, really good point. So starting at the positives, there were substantial changes in body composition, which I really want to highlight. Body comp is a big deal in any industry, in any profession. To have something that positively benefits body composition, said another way, to have something that lowers a person's percent body fat is a really, really good thing. That's a massive benefit. We also saw substantial changes in fire recruits' cardiorespiratory fitness, a couple different measures of balance and your kind of functional movements, in addition to stair climb, which is obviously quite the essential task for firefighters, especially recruits who are trying to go after the CPAT. Those are the kind of the bigger things we saw some solid changes in across the board. But we didn't necessarily stop just at the body comp and the cardio level. We also looked at a couple other metrics of strength. So we really push in our groups. We push the importance and relevance of strength and, you know, the strength and conditioning. And we also looked at a couple other metrics of strength. So we really push in our groups. We really push the importance and relevance of strength and, you know, the strength and conditioning. And we also looked at a couple other metrics of strength. So we really push in our groups. We push the importance and relevance of strength and, how it plays a role in injury prevention. And I don't want to go down that path yet, but we definitely should. And unfortunately, what we saw is the academy itself didn't really make recruits stronger. There were actually some evidence that strength went down with following the academy, throughout the academy, excuse me. We also didn't really see any changes in vertical jump. And you may kind of read vertical jump and you say, you know, who cares? Why do firefighters need a vertical jump? That's kind of a silly thing. Well, vertical jump comes from straight sports science background, which is all we are. We're groups of sports scientists, we're groups of strength and conditioning coaches. We're just applying sports science principles to the fire service. Vertical jump is a critical indicator of what we kind of look at as global neuromuscular performance. It's probably not the most precise indicator, but it gives us a very good outcome measure. If you have someone's neuromuscular function that improves dramatically, the vertical jump is also going to increase, especially when you think about body composition improving as well. So to see vertical jump not increasing is quite telling that there's perhaps something missing from this training program. And specific, maybe talking about the training program, we believe this is a pretty representative aspect of what PT looks like for fire service academies. About the first half of the fire service, or this particular academy, was really PT dominant. Think more of your kind of more boot camp based stuff, your calisthenics based stuff, a lot of running, push-ups, air squats, those types of calisthenic movements. And then the second half of the academy kind of transitions a little bit to more strict occupation related training. So we're teaching recruits, you know, how do you handle hydraulic tools, how do you handle ladders, hose drags, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of stepped away from the true physical training nature and went strictly into the occupation stuff. And we think that probably is a little bit telling as to why strength didn't really change, as to why your performance and like the vertical jump didn't really change. And those are probably pretty good indicators.
Well, Jacob, to circle back to body composition, this is the one thing that I see so often with the candidates, especially early on. And I think, I mean, you tell me if my theory about this is correct. I explain this to the candidates early on, that they're losing weight at a rapid rate, and their bodies are changing because their lives are structured now. They're getting up at a certain time, they're eating certain meals, they're going home, and by the time they get home, they're exhausted, their lifestyle has changed. They're structured, and so that I attribute that more. I mean, obviously, the physical training, but we all know that body composition has a lot to do with diet and structure of those diets. And is that a correct assumption?
Oh, absolutely. Diet is a big role when it comes to your body composition. I'd argue that a large misconception, even in my kind of kinesiology sports science world, is diets can be outworked, right? If you just work really hard, you can overcome with your diet. So if you're a new recruit, you're doing this training academy or any new physical endeavor, I can just kind of eat whatever and, you know, my life's going to change. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Diet is the fuel that we put into our vehicles. It's the vehicle in this case is just us. If you're not fueling correctly, you will set yourself up for having some poor body composition. Now, with terms of the academy, yeah, you're adding a lot of structure. You're adding potentially some regimented meals, depending on what the academy does and how it may provide. I'm not sure how you guys do it over there. Across the country, obviously, that's going to vary whether or not the academy will provide some food. I know some departments will actually encourage the macronutrients distribution for their recruits. So they're not going to give the recruit the food, but they're going to say, here's the amount of carbs, fats, proteins you need to consume on a daily basis. That is a big, big deal when it comes to maintaining or positively changing body composition in any direction.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're lacking in the training side of the academies, is we don't dive into meal planning or how to set these guys up for success as far as their macronutrients, and some of these guys have no idea what to eat and what's best for them. I kind of throw out at them about the risks of energy drinks and things like that that could be potentially harmful for what they're going to be doing in their academy setting, having them switch to things like applesauce for their pre-workout or right before we get out, because the way our academy is structured, they have their lunch, and right after lunch is when we go and do our PT. So they start off with, they're hungry early in the academy, everybody eat, and then they start getting the idea, okay, well, we're doing PT right after lunch. You'll see these lunches like change dramatically. No more pastas, no more burgers.
So, Jacob, I want you to connect the dots for our listeners, because right now it's three people that have various backgrounds in health, wellness, fitness, coaching, but maybe that's not necessarily all of our listeners. And so one of the things that you stated was that the academy training program did not necessarily make the recruits stronger because they were doing calisthenic type exercises. So from your physiology background, will you just explain that to the listeners, why they're not getting stronger?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for the opportunity. This is without getting, I don't want to expose myself too much as a super nerd, which is what I tell everyone.
Nerd out, Jacob. Nerd out.
Yes. Nerd out.
Careful what you wish for. Capture what you wish for. So strength is the topic, right? Strength, when the average layperson hears it, their brain goes immediately to thinking someone at the gym with a barbell on their back and lots of loud music and yelling and all that stuff. And that's fine. Unfortunately, strength is much more complicated than that and plays a significant role in our everyday life. We require strength to get out of bed without pain. We require strength to play with the kiddos, to walk the dog, and of course to lift weights, to do the job, to do anything in life. We have to have strength. The thing about strength is if you do not push your body to perform maximal strength efforts, your body doesn't convince itself that it needs those maximal strength efforts. So it simply says, well, I don't need to be strong, so I'm not going to be. When it comes to calisthenic type training, your body weight type training, that doesn't require a large amount of force. So in order to perform those activities, your body just is kind of just doing it. Your muscles contract okay. It's a really big stressor on your cardiovascular system, which is great. But it doesn't really stress your skeletal muscle system. It doesn't push them to grow because after all, they're more than capable of producing enough strength to move your body up and down. And we find that strength is a pretty big deal when it comes to getting at things like slip, trip, fall reduction, total balance reduction in multiple populations, including the fire service. So the idea that strength is not improving is definitely an opportunity to improve.
So before we get to the slips, trips, and falls, which I'm fascinated with, give us you gave us the positives that came out of the academy training. Give us the negatives that you found.
Yeah, the negatives all come down to that strength, and in fact, something that we measured that was not necessarily improved upon would be the hamstring to quadricep strength ratio. Hamstring to quadricep strength ratio is exactly as it sounds. It's how strong is your quads, which is the front part of your thigh muscles, relative to your hamstring muscles. The hamstrings are the backside of your thigh muscles. We need that ratio to be kind of improved upon with strength training. We want your hamstrings to be becoming stronger, is what it comes down to. When your hamstrings are a little weaker relative to your quadriceps, in addition to just general weakness, you're going to be exposing yourself to greater risk and greater likelihood of having a lower extremity injury. In the sports science world, we really push a lot of data towards the hamstring to quadricep ratio and its association with the ACL tear, which is obviously everyone knows torn ACLs are prevalent amongst lots of athletes. That's definitely a complicated topic, but hamstring and quadricep strength ratio plays a role there undoubtedly. So to see a lot of those aspects not changing, to see your whole body performance metrics, your vertical jumps not changing, those are big things that we can definitely improve upon. And thankfully, what I tell fire leaders everywhere is we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. It's The sports science world has fixed a lot of these problems over the last 15, 20 years. We just need to take the sports science lessons and apply them to the fire service.
So, Jacob, in your opinion, what can somebody like me, how can I cast a wider net and increase strength for 100 or so candidates? I have taken your study to heart, and these guys do their Nordic stretches now because you want to narrow that ham quad ratio, correct? You want them to be almost as equal as they can, get as close to just narrowing that ratio as you can.
Yeah, pretty much. The solution is definitely complicated the bigger the class is, right? If you've got 100 recruits, how do you solve this? You don't have all the time in the world. You don't have the ability to just go in one by one solve every recruit in your department. That's difficult. The biggest strokes that seem to make the largest kind of bang for your buck changes is progression of training. So what we're kind of getting at here, for those who might not be familiar, is progression from an exercise standpoint means we typically start the novice, the new person out at a relatively low intensity and or volume of exercise. But we want those things to gradually increase over time. By the time the recruit is done with the academy, the workout that they are doing is the animation for your strength and strength. You don't athlete bodybuilders, but it's simply not. It doesn't need to be. You don't have to be doing these dangerous activities of your 1 RM back squat and hurting yourself. You simply just need to load the skeletal muscle system enough to convince it that it needs to grow and become stronger. It doesn't take significant amounts of training. It does take a little bit in some focused areas and some focused time. 20 minutes fast for every.
We can build pretty much anything for these guys, but spending any money in our training for these guys, as far as like stuff like that, you would get pushback from pretty much 99.9% of the departments that run a training academy.
Oh no, I totally get it. Yeah, some of those are to still stress the skeletal muscle system, to add a new load to it. Farmers carries, heavy farmers carries. Grab a hose, grab a sandbag, grab something that's heavy, a piece of machinery, retired hydro tools, and you hold on to that and walk 100 meters or walk a lap around your facility. That will build strength. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't need to be these crazy things you may see on the internet. If it's hard, if it requires a lot of strength to do, it will make the body grow.
Well, here's something that other academies can implement that we've done in Chicago is we've gotten those like Home Depot buckets. We've taken some webbing and we've turned those into handles, and we put a chunk of PVC pipe on them, and they'll carry those. We fill them with sand, and they walk around the block with carrying 2 of those. I mean, they're heavy as shit, but it is a humbler for sure. So if I'm glad that you actually said that, because now I feel better about having them do that.
Vince has a vindication.
Absolutely, yeah. That is fire service ingenuity at its finest. I love it.
So, Jacob, it occurs to me, I don't write individual programs, coaching programs for anyone anymore. I used to do that years ago. But it occurs to me that if you are a strength and conditioning coach, independent, or personal trainer that's independent and working with a firefighter that's going through the academy, you would be very well served, or you would be serving that firefighter very well, to really focus on that posterior chain strength, knowing that their academy physical training is going to be focusing on the opposite due to limitations in equipment. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good thing to kind of look at. Yeah, focusing on outside of the academy, focusing on posterior chain, the backside, if you will. I think that's a very good outlook.
And one of the things, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I know you're going to agree with me. So I'm just basically, this is confirmation bias right here, but my platform, my pedestal, my whatever you want to call it, is that I really feel like firefighters deserve qualified and competent coaches, whether that's strength and conditioning coaches, dietitians, so on and so forth. And what you're saying, the research that you're telling us really speaks to support for that. We really need people that know what they're doing to work with firefighters.
Yes, wholeheartedly agree. We have data that suggests that firefighters may be a public servant, but really they should be looked at as athletes. Kind of a funny aside. So I'm presently an assistant professor at Texas Tech University, but prior to this, I was a professor at the University of Alabama. And one of the jokes there was, as I was a professor in the kinesiology, someone around town would hear, so, oh, you must work with athletes. You're a professor in the kinesiology department at Alabama. I kind of get a similar but not as frequent response here at Texas Tech. And the answer is, yeah, absolutely. I work with athletes every day, just not the athletes you think of. Firefighters are as much athletes as the fellows who are playing in playoffs this weekend. It's just they don't get the same recognition. They should be looked at in the same, because when firefighters are needed, they are needed because of their physical capabilities. That sounds a lot like an athlete to me.
Well, there's actually a sign at one of the firehouses. I'm not going to say which house in Chicago, but it says that a firefighter at a working fire is working harder than any professional athlete at that given time.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, not getting paid as much, but maybe one day that might change, right?
Well, that would be something. That would be something.
The one thing is, though, that city leaders definitely need to consider, and fire administrators, of course, is what is the best route forward, right? How do you have a firefighter be able to stay on top of all their CEUs, like you're describing, Vince, like you're really trying to be also play that role for these recruits, so leading them, show them how to do the fire service, but also how do you be physically capable of yourself. Having someone with a fire service, an understanding of the fire service, but also an innate understanding of physical training, of programming, of basic applications of nutrition, that will go a long, long way.
Well, Jacob, I know Annette put you on the spot earlier. I'd like to do the same. If you had to pick which serves the 99 percentile of firefighter candidates, would you say that it is more beneficial for them to get a better engine or to be stronger?
Ooh, yeah, you did put me on the spot, huh?
That's a hard one, Vince. That's almost not fair. Almost not fair.
It's almost not fair, but when do I get an opportunity to really hold somebody of this caliber's feet to the fire? It's only for my own edification here, because I want to know which, obviously the correct answer is both, but if you were to lean one way or the other, if you were in my position, which would you be focusing more on?
Yeah, definitely. My feet are burning right now, but you can't see me on video. You just see me squirming all around my space here. So
is there anything based in your studies that would make you lean one way or the other?
Well, it's definitely a question that we've never really looked at so specifically. So I wouldn't be able to lean on that data per se. But what I would give you the response is probably like this: strength takes substantially much more effort to obtain. It takes longer amounts of time you have to dedicate to training in order to become quite strong. Cardiorespiratory endurance or capabilities required for the job, they don't take, in my opinion, as long to meet. You're never going to be an elite cardiorespiratory athlete in 6 weeks, but you can improve your VO2 to a level that's going to allow you to do the job well quite quickly in say, a few weeks of training.
See, I like that metric.
Yeah, the VO2, it's good. It's very important. And there's a lot of really good data to show what the firefighter needs from a VO2 standpoint. But because it takes so long to gain strength, and because the recruits are in a position where they're mandated to be working out in a very structured format, I would almost focus more on the strength thing. But I say that with a big asterisk, around all that because we all know a big problem with fire service is cardiac issues. And especially as you look at firefighters who are doing the job for longer, cardiac issues are a really big deal. So it's hard to just say, yeah, just focus on strength without thinking, hey, we also need to focus on the cardiovascular system and the cardiovascular health because of the role that it plays in line of duty deaths every year for the last 15 plus years. So long-winded answer saying both.
Well, I also want to find out, based on your studies, is because I'm so fascinated by the VO2 metric. Have you guys gone with these candidates? Because I didn't see anything in the literature about. Have you guys followed them through consumption drills or anything like that, with them going through a bottle of air and how they fared, like prior? Before, early in the academy to the end of the academy?
Well, very, very timely that you asked me that. I just had a data set kind of completed yesterday, looking at air consumption metric or an air consumption drill in addition to a bunch of demographic variables, body composition, VO2 max testing, CPET. So we do have that data. We just haven't had a chance to really dive down. So give me a little bit, and then give me another call and we can talk about that part in the future, but that is definitely forthcoming.
It's not that much of a stretch to say that if you had a rocking VO2, that you would actually, you would be longer on your bottle and you wouldn't run out of air as soon as somebody whose VO2 wasn't the greatest.
Oh, hands down. Hands freaking down. Yes. If your VO2 is high, your 45-minute bottle maybe lasting you 60 minutes.
So, I mean, that would be something that we could strive for in training. I think that if we had a way where we could increase VO2 in our candidates, would it be fair to say that would be a good place to start with making a stronger engine for some of these candidates?
Yeah, I do. I do think that, especially from a working fire standpoint, your VO2 is going to be high, and maybe, just to throw it out there and explain, VO2 stands for volume of oxygen. This is essentially a metric of how much air that you can breathe in and utilize within your body, how much air your lungs can take the oxygen out of and then push that into your blood, and then your heart push that blood to your working muscles. The more efficient that your body is at extracting oxygen from the air, the bulk air that you're moving into your lungs, and the more efficient your heart is at moving that blood around, the higher your VO2. So that should make a lot of sense to someone who's sucking down a bottle really, really fast as to why am I sucking down a 45-minute bottle in 20 minutes whenever I've got my buddy over here who's not even 20 minutes into a working fire, hasn't even touched a quarter of his bottle. VO2 is a big reason for it. Probably not the only reason, but it's a big deal.
So, Jacob, now that Vince held your toes to the fire, made you sweat, made you squirm, let's just take it down. Let's take it down a notch for a second. So you and I spoke on the phone, and I believe it was Jenna was the lead author on the study regarding muscle quality and rate of torque development and how that relates to slips, trips, and falls. Am I right on that, first of all?
Well, the good news is it's either going to be Jenna or I, and I'm not positive which one of us it was. We've done a couple of papers kind of in that muscle quality and functional balance type movement, but yeah, we can keep going.
All right. Well, all right. So we're just going to say Jacob and Jenna wrote a paper, and it's really interesting because I never considered that the quality of your muscles might influence your slips, trips, and falls. And so start at the kindergarten level and explain to us what that even means, Jacob.
Yeah, so muscle quality is a super neat little metric. Essentially, muscle quality is, and the way we use it a lot, is in reference to a variable that we calculate from an ultrasound scan. Many people are familiar with ultrasounds. The way I tell my undergraduate students, it's the Same little tool that maybe a physician will use to check on a pregnant mother, right? Take a picture of the baby. But we take that same tool and we look at the muscle. So we are interested in the quality of the muscle, which is really just a ratio of how much contractile to non-contractile tissue there is. If you're a meat eater yourself, and you think of it in the form of maybe like a piece of a beefsteak, you'll look at a steak and you'll admire perhaps the marbling within the steak. That marbling, it's flavor and it tastes great. Marbling is present in human muscle too, though. Unfortunately, that marbling in us means that our muscles do not work as well. The increased intramuscular fat that's present within muscles means that you physically cannot contract your muscles as well as if you could if you didn't have that intramuscular fat. So we use this muscle quality metric with ultrasound to give us a little bit of an indication of how much intramuscular fat does one have within their muscle of interest. We've done a number of studies over the years, kind of our team at UNC back then with Jenna, with myself, Hayden, of course, our boss, Dr. Eric Ryan, to look and see the role of muscle quality in many different aspects of muscle function. Some of which we did do quite a bit of work in fire. The study that I definitely remember off the top of my head that Jenna wrote, was the lead author on. This was looking at, I believe, shift work. We didn't look specifically at slip, trips, falls with that muscle quality metric. We did do a separate study looking at slip, trips, falls, but we didn't do it with muscle quality.
So am I understanding this correct? Muscle quality does impact slips, trips, and falls, or it does not?
Yeah, so muscle quality, muscle quality does impact your ability to contract your muscles, yes. Without a doubt, muscle quality is going to be influencing how strong of a contraction that you're going to be able to perform. Got it.
And as an aging woman, I'm going to be 52 tomorrow. Happy birthday to
happy
me.
Birthday.
Happy birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, but as an aging woman, is this muscle quality something that's sort of a byproduct of age too? We're fighting against that change in muscle quality along with everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ticket that we're dealt. The tricky part about age and muscle is as we age, really after in our 40s, we start to lose muscle mass at roughly around the rate of about a percentage per year. Now that rate can be modulated by a number of different factors. The really big unfortunate aspect of that is the first muscles that we kind of lose, if you will, are what we call type 2 muscle fibers. These type 2 muscle fibers are what we rely on to be our real big heavy hitters when it comes to force production. When we really need to produce a lot of strength and a lot of force, we call those type 2 muscle fibers in order to really give us the backup. But as we age, those are the first puppies to check out and say see you later.
My puppies have checked out, Jacob. So sad. Vince, I need to take a break. You go ahead and continue. I'm just going to cry.
You have another day? You have another day?
That's true. I do have another day.
But Jacob, this muscle quality can be altered with strength training, correct?
Absolutely. With strength training, you're able to essentially increase the amount of contractile tissue or the amount of muscle fibers that you can use to produce force and strength. And a byproduct of that is you can also decrease the amount of intramuscular fat that's present within muscles. So it's a double whammy in a very good way.
So you can, in theory, hit the pause button on your clock as far as muscle quality with proper strength training, correct?
Absolutely. I'd argue that from a function standpoint, you can hit the pause button on a loss of function that comes with aging with strength training, with exercise in general, but really strength training is a very effective way at hitting that pause button.
See, look at it. AZ, you're good.
I know.
You're good.
You're solid.
I'm solid.
No problem.
Well, Jacob, Let's just tie some thoughts together, because we now know that we need to maintain our muscle as we age. I think we've accepted that we need to maintain our muscle. We know that strength training is important, but we also know that protein consumption is important.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. That was my next.
I know you did a little bit of work with Dr. Hirsch in a couple of protein studies, but give us the wave tops. What do we need to know about protein, especially as we age?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Dr. Hirsch and I, we go back a long ways. Katie's fantastic, far better person than me. We are still pretty close to this day. She was at my wedding. She's definitely knows more about the protein metabolism side than I do, but I do know enough of the way to push it to the layperson. And in a very simple way, protein is incredibly important. Protein contains essentially buildups of amino acids, and these amino acids are key to maintaining muscle mass, to maintaining function, and to maintaining a high quality of life. So when it comes to takeaways for firefighters, we need more protein than the average person is consuming. In fact, one of the studies that you referred to, we looked at essentially the influence of someone's regular amount of protein intake on body composition, right? So we just we looked at a whole bunch of firefighters, and we asked them to essentially do 3-day dietary recalls. Just tell us what they ate over the last 3 days, essentially. And what we found was that when people ate over about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass, those people were having more favorable body composition, meaning that individuals who are consuming more amounts of protein, the better their body composition really turned out to be. That's for a number of factors. Protein itself has a big satiety factor, right? So satiety is hunger. If you eat a carb-heavy meal, your satiety is not going to maybe be as fulfilled as if you ate a protein-heavy meal. I'm not sure if it matters too much if you go an animal protein versus a plant protein, but research is pretty clear that protein as a whole makes you feel less hungry. So the more protein you consume, the better your body composition is, the better you're probably eating, or perhaps less likely to overeat.
Well, if you think about if you've ever gone out for a steak dinner, you get to a point where you just can't eat any more steak, but you can always grab one more French fry, or there's always that little piece of bread that you can have.
Exactly.
You can never try stopping with fries. If they had an all-you-can-eat fry buffet, you'd be there for a day. But you can't have 5 hamburgers.
Yep, it's the thing that when people realize, that's the role that protein takes into how well I'm eating, and then you look at why am I eating all this pasta? Well, it doesn't have a lot of protein, so my body doesn't have a signal to say, hey, you've consumed a lot of food. It's very quickly broken down and absorbed, whereas protein kind of sits in our gut and our body knows it, so it says, hey, chill out, guys. Let's go back to reality. Drink some water.
Well, Jacob, in any firehouse, you could go to any firehouse across the country, and you're going to find protein, you're going to find creatine, and you're going to find amino acids. And I've heard both sides of the story, that you can take your amino acids, you can throw them in the garbage. And I've even heard that, uneducated people say that you don't need your protein supplements as well. You should just get that from food. But and I've used creatine as well with great results. But can you chime in if you have any information about those 3 big hitters that we would find at a firehouse?
Yeah, protein, creatine, amino acids, or essential aminos, or maybe branched-chain aminos. When it comes to supplementation, the key is the word supplement. This is supposed to be in supplementation. I too hear that argument of, hey, why are you drinking this protein shake? Just go eat more food. Well, the advantages of a protein shake is that it does provide you with a relatively large amount of protein in a relatively small calorie window, right? Especially if you drink it in, say, like a water beverage, you don't have to worry about extra calories that may come from mixing the protein shake and something else. What you perhaps want to get away from is relying solely on supplements and whey protein shakes or those types of things. You want to get a little bit away from that, relying on it as your primary source of protein. Probably more if anything, just from a gastrointestinal health standpoint, simply rely more on it as the insurance policy to make sure that you're getting enough protein rather than the leading edge, fighting the tip of the spear, fighting the battle. Creatine is another one of those things where you actually do consume creatine as part of your diet. If you eat a steak, you're consuming arguably a large chunk of creatine. But creatine, from a supplement standpoint, has many benefits beyond musculoskeletal health. And I want to be clear, I'm definitely not the creatine expert of the group. Some of my friends like Katie and Katie's PhD advisor, Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan, those are definitely more people who are very versed in the creatine literature than I am. But the broad stroke takeaway is creatine is beneficial from a cognitive benefits, from a neuroprotective benefit, think TBI, in addition to things like increasing amounts of muscle mass, increasing anaerobic performance capabilities. Creatine is one of the few supplements that is shown to be effective, efficacious, and pretty safe. You can't really say that about too many sports supplements. It's definitely kind of a crazy world when it comes to mixing the supplements that do work really well without being dangerous to someone's health. Whey protein, supplemental protein, creatine, those are fine things to take.
And Jacob, here's a shameless plug for episode, I believe it was 8 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. Dr. Creatine Scott Forbes was my guest, but we talked about you can get all the creatine you need in your diet. You would just need to eat like 4 pounds of steak or 6 pounds of cod or several gallons of milk. So it's just not feasible for most people. So, it's probably not feasible for anyone. So supplementation on the creatine is something that's pretty much across the board gold stamp for me.
Yep, and you're not needing to take tons of creatine. You don't need to take pounds of creatine. 5 grams of creatine per day is fine. That's actually the dose that's recommended from many journals. I believe the ISSN suggests 5 grams of creatine just as a maintenance dose. It's fine. It's totally fine from a long-term safety standpoint about whether or not you can handle it. It's totally fine. There doesn't seem to be a lot of negative evidence against creatine by any means.
And no need to cycle on and off?
No, not really. There's not evidence that I'm aware of. Again, there's others out there who are more experts in that field. But the evidence I'm aware of, you can have long-term creatine supplementation and be just fine.
I want to go back to your study before I hammer you on some more supplementation stuff. But are you guys planning on going back to these 19 recruits and seeing where they are further down the line? Or are you guys done with them?
That's a wonderful question. No, unfortunately, we are kind of done with them right now. This, like many things in life, was directly impacted by COVID. So we wrapped up data collection for the study right before COVID hit. And, I blinked and we're in 2023 now. I don't know if y'all know. So we just kind of all fast forwarded through it. We are here at my present institution at Texas Tech. We are actually starting a new study with the Lubbock Police Department Academy. And we are going to be doing follow-up assessments with some of their people over the next couple of years. So those studies are forthcoming, but not with this crew here.
Okay. And one more thing before I forget, because I had this written down to ask you, but were you guys just going to be objectively measuring metrics, or were you actually involved in providing your input on like increasing vertical jump, increasing strength, increasing because you went through a whole litany of metrics from start to finish with these guys. Did you guys have input on their training, or were you just gathering data?
Yeah, great question. We are purely, from this study standpoint, purely there from a metrics. We didn't want to get in the way. Where our kind of philosophy here is, we're not the boots on the ground firefighters. We're not the officers here. We're not going to tell people how to do their job, but we want to collect data that helps the decision makers understand what their job is, or understand what maybe you can make more efficient or more better. So we didn't have any input, kind of intentionally. That was purely the decision of the academy.
Because I could go on for hours.
Listen,
But
we're on a schedule here, Vince. It's nap time for the baby. Well, Jacob, what I usually do at the end of my episodes is I say, was there anything else that I should have asked you that I did not? Or do you have closing thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
One thing we probably we started to talk about, and then we got sidetracked. And I take full responsibility here. My grad students can attest that I get sidetracked very, very quickly. I'm one of those types of people. I don't really take myself too seriously. I take my work really seriously. But me, I'm a little different. I'm just Jake. That's it. We did a study. I guess it was published 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe 4 or 5. We did physically look at balance in firefighters, something I thought was kind of cool. And one thing I just wanted to bring up, kind of wrapping back and getting away from the recruits and more into the incumbent workers. This study in firefighters, we looked at functional balance, which is a unique little metric where we asked firefighters to essentially walk a plank while wearing full bunker gear, avoid an overhead obstacle, and then walk backwards on this plank. We asked firefighters to perform this functional balance assessments as quickly as they can. And what we found oftentimes surprises a lot of people. We looked at a litany of neuromuscular variables. We looked at everything under the sun from our super nerd science standpoint. We looked at peak torque, which is your maximal torque production capability. We looked at the rate of torque development, or the ability to generate torque quickly. And then we looked at also the influence of age, the influence of body composition, and a number of other things on someone's ability to navigate this firefighter-specific functional balance assessment. And what we found was there are 3 variables that are very important. Age, percent body fat, and the ability to generate force or strength quickly were the 3 substantial indicators or predictors of performance in this task. So that is to say that age, strength, and body comp are very important in this group. And what I tell, I kind of give the spiel about once a year to firefighters or different organizations. And my spiel is, I can't do anything about age. I wish I could, but we're moving forward. My 2-year-old is growing every day like a weed. But we can change percent body fat in firefighters, in anyone. And we can make people stronger. Those are things we can change. And the data suggests that body composition and strength are critical indicators of injury risk. And that's really what we want to be. That's what our kind of future focus has been over the last several years, is to really fully elucidate the role of strength in not only the fire service, but also law enforcement agencies combined.
I think your balance study is my new deep dive. That fascinates me as well, because in gear, and that you can attribute to this, I feel like a toddler.
I'm like that little kid on the Christmas Story in his snowsuit.
Yeah, and that's how I feel like I'm moving. I always feel like I'm moving in quicksand with the boots and the gear and everything. My dexterity is, I would say, half. I feel like it's half. And my legs get really heavy really quickly. And I don't know if you guys have gathered your data yet on that study, but I really feel like an orange on a toothpick. That's how I feel when you're fully encapsulated.
Well, Jacob, I'm going to feed you your next study because you can thank me later. Female specific gear is all but non-existent in the fire service. It does exist, but many departments either don't know about it or don't want to buy it because it's more expensive. Also, female-specific turnout boots, I don't think exist at all. So I have to just wear a smaller men's size. And we know that the last that those boots are built on are made from men's feet, which are different than women's feet. So here's your study comparing the ability to do the balance test simply between males and females, and then drilling down, does that female in fact have female specific gear or not? You're welcome. Thank me later.
No, that is a fantastic study. Absolutely. Female firefighters are not just, a different form of men. They're different physiology. They have different unique needs. They still do the job incredibly well. and arguably in some cases, some data suggests maybe a little better. But yeah, those are substantial disadvantages that the female firefighter faces that is going to increase injury risk.
So at NSCA National, when you buy me a beer to thank me for giving you the study, we will also name the study, "You're not clumsy, it's just your shit doesn't fit."
And they have to cite, have to cite you in the study.
Oh, yes. I collaborate on a lot of studies now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a slam dunk.
Well, Jacob, if any of the listeners are interested in reaching out afterwards, are you okay if I share your email and social media platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love helping people, love helping firefighters, and the fire service just get better. So I'd be happy to help anyone or chat at any time.
Well, that is wonderful, and we'll make sure and get that contact information in the show notes. Vince, any final thoughts?
I'm going to stop now because every time Jacob talks about another study, I'm fascinated. So I want to do this again, if it's all right with you, Jacob.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is great.
And I'll tell you how the implementation of your study, as it directly relates to the candidates that we're working with right now, I'll give you some feedback.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That sounds fantastic. I can't wait to hear.
Because we're trying to implement a stronger vertical jump platform, and we're working on that ham quad ratio diligently, actively working on that.
I like it.
That sounds fantastic. Sounds like great improvements are ahead.
All right, Jacob. Well, we are so appreciative of you. And with that, we will sign off. This has been AZ and
Vince from Chicago's Bravest Stories.
And we are officially out. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.